Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Monday Night News. It's a Monday, I know that for sure. I've got myself, Michael Burgio, my colleague Stevan Bubalo, and tonight we're going to be talking about the property cycles. We've got, downturns, stabilisations, upturns, and boom. Sorry, I just dropped a drink. Little hair everywhere. Passing it on. What a terrible
Michael.
Start.
No, we're right on track. So good to be back with you, Michael, on this Monday night. And tonight's topic, something we thought might be of interest to everybody, and that's not just spruiking real estate, but let's talk about the cycles that you're going to find in the world of real estate and where are we, in what cycle are we, and let's just go from there.
We'll just talk about the macro cycles. So there's micro cycles where everyone talks about selling in spring and month to month. We want to go a little bit broader and a little bit more holistic when it comes to cycles over years.
So, look, as Australians, we absolutely love real estate, Northern Beaches. Most people, Michael, you and I could attest that everyone likes to make fun of being around a real estate agent, but wherever we go to a party, everyone wants to talk about how's the market, what's going on, ins and outs. So, look, we've basically come out to identify that the property cycles or the market is actually split into 4 individual phases. And each phase comes with its pros and cons, and probably more so to do with residential real estate, commercial, probably a little bit more factored by economical circumstances. But we're going to talk more residential today. So what are the 4 phases in real estate? Number 1 is when that market starts coming down. That's called obviously the downturn phase. Stabilisation, it levels out. Then we'll start to see an upturn. And then it's generally followed by a boom period. So let's get into it, Michael. We'll talk about kind of what phases, what they detail, and then essentially when we've seen them too.
It's a little tricky because a lot of the time you don't know what phase you're in at the time. A lot of it's looking back historically, going. It's almost like it's with shares. It's very tough to sell at the top and buy at the bottom. And Tom Panos always says you don't know you're at the top until it starts going down, and you don't know you're at the bottom until it starts going back up.
Yes.
So it's very easy to look historically, and you always have the people who, well, I got one client, we drive past this one house, and he goes, I could have bought that for X amount this many years ago. So it's, I suppose, just because you're in a downturn or a stabilization period, there are pros and cons to buying or selling, and believe it or not, sometimes it may be good to sell in a downturn market, and maybe we'll start with that. Some pros and cons on a downturn market. So maybe first of all, what is a downturn market?
Pretty self-explanatory. It's a period in which property prices are generally falling or coming down. I won't use the term falling because they don't really fall far, but they definitely do cycle up and down. And it's typically the downward cycle. And there's a number of factors that can really come into play for these periods. Obviously, economic factors, rates, things like that. That's typically what seems to drive our markets, economic slowdown, the GFC, that type of stuff. It's typically got to do more around the access to money. Things like that. So
that's a good point. How interest rate, so a government decision can impact the market, and it's probably very easy. Just in the last couple of years, if you look at, we'll get into what COVID and what that cycle was, but just in the last 2 years, where you saw interest rates go from 1.7% to 6-7%, we saw that market go down. But pros and cons of buying or selling in a downturn. A big pro, if you're upsizing, this is almost like a market.
The best time to do it.
Yeah, this is the cycle that you want to be doing a deal in. And the reason is, and the simple numbers, let's say you're selling your $1 million 2-bedroom apartment. Let's say in an upturn market, it was 1.2. Now it's $1 million. You may think that's terrible, but you've got to look at what you're going to buy. Now, let's say you're upsizing to a $2 million house, and in an up market, that is 2.2, but in a down market, that is 1.8, 1.9. So even though you're selling for 100 or 200 grand less, you could be buying I need to make the downturn a bit more drastic. Let's say it was 2.5. Now it's 2 million. You're saving 500,000. Yes, you sell for 100 grand less, but overall, you're in a better position.
100%. You'll take 10%. Just say it's down 10. You lose 10. You're down 100 grand, $100,000. Sorry, the one you're buying 2.5.
Yep.
It's down 250,000. So you're actually in the green, $150,000, upsizing in that down cycle.
So I suppose that downturn market's a bit tougher if you're the one selling that house.
You want to upsize in the down market,
yeah.
not downsize if you can avoid it. What are the signals? What are some of the things to look out for, and how to identify what a downsizer market might look like? Is typically your homes are going to sit on the market longer.
Days on market.
Days on market will push out. A Northern Beaches property will generally sell within 2 to 4 weeks. In a downturn market, it could be 8 weeks, sometimes even 12 weeks. You could see a property out there.
I think a trend or for agents, we look at expired listings. So typically when an owner signs an agreement, it's 90 days with an agent. So it's because even in a good market, some listings can go a little bit longer. So, but the downturn, it's really 90 days plus, I reckon. Yeah. So if you start seeing properties be with one agent, not sell, go to another agent, that's probably your easiest indicator to see. And it's not just one property. You're talking if a suburb may, let's say Chroma, 10 houses selling a month, if you're noticing 10%, 30% of them are taking a couple agents to sell, that's probably a key factor for you to look out. Yeah,
definitely. The other thing also is discounting. So it's not that common, but agents will generally have a guide price. If you see that price coming down, it's typically an indicator of, and not for one property, but across the majority of the suburb, you will see.
Because there are bad agents out there who sell low pricing in good times.
Absolutely.
There's a few down the street.
Yeah. So that's your downturn market, and I think as an indicator for Sydney and definitely the Northern Beaches, that was 2022, 2023, even last year, 2023, probably the main one, I would think. Just as interest rates kept pushing up and up and up, and uncertainty and an unclear message from the Federal Reserve Bank as to where rates were going, really pushed that market down. So that was a downturn market.
Right. The next cycle, stabilisation.
Yeah.
What is that?
Stabilisation, well, it's pretty easy as well. It is a level playing field. It's typically the market isn't showing indicators of trending downwards anymore, but it hasn't seen or is not seeing a rapid increase or any kind of increase really in property pricing. And like you said, Michael, there's pros and cons to both as well.
I think a good pro would be buying and selling is a big decision for families. They think about it a long time. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of decisions out there. And what can be very bad, and agents always say you want to buy and sell in the same market. And a big reason for that is there's nothing worse than, let's say in an up market, you're selling your $1 million apartment to buy that house for $2 million, but the market's going up so much that you wait 6 months and the property you were going to buy is now worth 2.5 and you can't afford it. And then you look back at what you've sold, now that's 1.2, 1.3 to buy back in. That can be very heartbreaking. And we see a lot of people end up just not buying and stay in the rental market when I remember hearing this horror story in Warriewood. It was before COVID. This guy financed, thought the market was going to tank because of COVID. They sold their townhouse for, let's say it was 1.5. As we all know, the market went up 50% and they were priced out. They couldn't do anything. And that's heartbreaking to hear. So that's where a stable market, as much as it doesn't have all the media attention of a great market booming, it can be very desirable for when you've got a bit more time to make your decision. You can do that due diligence. Yeah,
and it's just, you feel safer. You can make, again, just the pressure of the whole property situation is not on you. An indicator of the stabilisation period is that you're seeing properties transacting typically probably within a 4 to 6 or 8 week period, but you'll notice that the advertised price and the sale prices are relatively similar to where they are There's still agents that underquote, but
Yep.
the majority of them will be selling close to what the advertised price is with those. So stabilisation period, sorry to give you an idea, is I would say we've just seen one. We're coming out of one. Even today is I think we're on the fringe of the upturn stabilisation phase. As agents, we're tracking the number of buyers coming through open homes, and so when we're seeing a consistent number of potential buyers coming through, not a huge increase, that's telling us it's a stable market as well, week in, week out.
But I think you're spot on with the key. It's also very hard for owners to get the information with pricing, but if you have a good relationship with an agent, they have access to software where they can, RP data will capture the list price. So the agent started at 1.8 and it sells for 1.9 or 1.8 and it's downturn that list for 1.8, then it's 1.7, 1.6. A lot of that data is not necessarily as easy to get publicly, and realestate.com can be quite misleading with, as you said, agents underquoting to make it look good, but any decent agent should be able to get you some of this data as well.
Yep.
Now, the next phase, upturn.
The upturn phase.
Let me guess, things are going up.
Things are going up. So it's not that it's completely out of control, but prices are moving up, and it's typically got to do with confidence. And again, our market's driven more so by access to money. Yeah. But we're seeing the messages in the media already, interest rates starting to come down, talk of future interest rate drops as well. And these are boosting buyer confidence. And we're starting to see, obviously, a very, very busy weekend across the apartment market this Saturday. I think my colleague Glenn, had 3 apartments open, over 40 buyers through those 3 apartments on Saturday, which is a huge increase from maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. And we're probably seeing, half of those numbers. Yeah. The upturn phase is a good time to buy as well. So you're kind of getting into it just as the market's picking up. If you're looking at buying, it's still a relatively, I won't say safe, but it's a little bit easier of a path to navigate.
But better buying if you're downsizing, because when we're using that analogy before, your $2 million house, you can get a $2.2 million price. So you're up 200 grand compared to the $1 million, maybe $1.05 million. Yeah. But keep in mind more competition. So this is when you're in the downturn where you may be the only offer maker. You got a little bit more time with that transaction, getting contracts to check. So I probably more so in the next phase, which we'll get to, but you see a lot more buyers pushing for an exchange on a cool off period just to lock up the property. But this is also when the agents can be like, another buyer's got a contract. So I think to notice speed, you have to execute once you see the property. You hear it. I saw it on Saturday and it's already sold.
There's offers on it on Monday, or it's sold on Monday. The other thing I was going to say is that typically an upward cycle, as much as there's competition for buyers, as more buyers are entering the marketplace, typically you'll see an increase of listings. So owners that have decided not to sell because prices were coming back are now thinking, look, this is the time for me to get on the market, sell and look to change my property position. So with the upturn, not only are there more buyers circulating the market, you should see an increase in the number of properties for sale.
So it's almost, there's definitely these pros and cons for each of the markets. Like as much as booming, if you're buying, it may not sound good because you're potentially paying more, but you also have more stock to choose from. And then as much as everyone says, they want to buy when the market's going down, it's very tough. And you touched on it before, media sentiment, each market plays a big role.
Massive.
I know I see this a lot in residential compared to commercial, where an article could, or a news, the presenters online are talking about interest rates dropping, great market, great real estate market, things are going up. You'll hear the next conversation with a buyer or a seller. How about the market? How good? Did you see this? Did you see that? And everyone's just got that extra jump in their step when it comes to auctions, bidding, or making offers. And then on the reverse, when things are negative, like it's highly emotive. It's highly emotive, I think would be the word.
Yeah. The way you can, I was going to say also that as a consumer, like Michael said, we as agents are on the front line. So we've got our fingers on the pulse. We can see these changes coming through. If you're a consumer, you're a buyer in the market, you don't have access or you don't know a good agent, have a look at the properties you're looking at and then see how quick they're turning over. But also pay attention to, how many other people are attending the open homes that you might be attending. If the volume's high and the turnover is quick, we're in an upward cycle.
There's a lot you can see without having any knowledge or knowing any agents. You can see for yourself. You can see if there's a lot of people at the open homes. You can see if properties are up, and like realestate.com, I believe they tell you when something's listed, and so like you can see how quickly properties are selling to give you a bit of an idea. But let's get on to the next one, the fun one. Phases in the property market, the boom.
The boom. The boom. When did we see a boom? We saw a boom straight after COVID when everyone said there was going to be a drop, like you just mentioned, Michael, with the gentleman in Warriewood. And a boom cycle is basically, from my experience, is the upturn phase, but it combines a larger volume of buyers, but then it also starts putting in the fear of missing out with buyers, and essentially,
FOMO.
The buyers fuel their own market to this degree, and it takes off, and it can move really rapidly. Essentially, you see a property on Saturday, it's sold on Saturday.
This is when, I think, just taking a step back, also we saw the latest boom was influenced by the government slashing interest rates.
Yes.
So that's like people always want to look for indicators. How can you get in before the boom or when you should act? A lot of it is these macro cycles are heavily impacted by global affairs and national policies. So we saw the virus, COVID, and everyone thought the market was going to go down. And then the government impacted the market by slashing interest rates from 4% to 1.5%. And then you saw the market shoot up. Yeah. It's crazy how, and this is where it's very important which government's in power. And also, you may not be into politics or anything like that, but it's good to sort of just keep an ear out of what are they doing and how could that impact the market. So we're in a boom. What are some pros for buyers?
For buyers, you can buy a property quick.
More choice.
That's a pro. There's more choice. More choice out there. I think if you're an experienced buyer and you know how to transact quickly, it's going to put you in an advantage over buyers who might have just entered that property cycle.
So having your finance approved, the confidence.
Definitely.
This is when the sayings like we're buying it all cash. We can make the offer today, sign the contract, no cooling off, and execute. That's not very important in a downturn because there may only be one buyer. But in the booming, you're competing with multiple buyers.
Probably 4 or 5 offers on every property that you're looking at. And you're right, Michael. And it's those buyers, I think, that have experienced the upturn, have also experienced the process of how to put in an offer, moving quickly, things like that. Now, dare I say, we have a saying, and it probably applies everywhere. What is it? In good times, bad habits form. In bad times, good habits form. When the market's really good, there's a lot of people that decide to join the real estate industry. And their experience or their
luxury car purchases go up. I used to track that actually, the pricing when I check the property listings. I was checking the luxury car listings. So during the good times, there was very little. Everything selling quick. They'll say only 10 Audi R8s, or I was looking at Audi R8s or the Porsche. And then in a downturn, you see all these listings go up. So
that's a good indicator. The number of luxury cars for sale.
That's a good point. So in a boom time, the agents won't call you back on Monday. In the downtime, they're calling you back on Saturday. They're calling you back. A good agent will call you all the time. But that's the importance of being proactive. A lot of the time, the agents don't have to work too hard to sell the property in the boom, and it's buyers basically throwing themselves. It's like being the pretty girl at the dance. Everyone just throwing. We wouldn't know, but we've seen in movies, guys just throw themselves at the pretty girl.
Yeah.
So,
but the boom cycle as well, and this is the message I'd like to say to people is the best time to buy a property or sell a property is when you need to buy or when you need to sell a property. And buyers will say to us, I don't want to buy in the boom, or I overpaid for a property. You only overpaid for a property when you sell the property and didn't turn a profit. Yeah. If you're going to hold that home or that apartment or that commercial space for 7 years or 10 years, you're going to be coming out ahead. And I've seen buyers, believe it or not, just as an example, I'll have an apartment for sale at $1 million. The market's super hot. It goes to 1.1. They turn around, they say, look, I'm sick of competing with everyone. I'll just pay 1.2, buy the thing. okay, it's significantly over market, the price they paid. In 2-3 years, the property's worth 1.2.
Yeah.
And they've secured it, a few years earlier, haven't really capitalized on 3 years growth. They're going to hold it for another 10 years and they're going to double their money anyway.
We have a great graph where it's like the last 40 years of history and pricing, and it's literally every 10 years the property market has basically doubled. So if you overpay, just wait a few years. But also, there's nothing wrong with overpaying if you've loved the property and you're sick of it.
Absolutely. If you're going to live there, if it's the home that suits your family and you're going to get in there and it's close to the school you want your kids to go to or your kids go to, what's it matter? Are you going to sell it in 20 years? Also,
I remember when I was looking for my apartment, I looked at the difference between, say, $800 to $850. It was like $20 on the mortgage. And once I saw that, I probably shouldn't have, because then I just paid it. Because I was like, it doesn't matter. I just want to secure it.
We're not saying, look, don't go beyond your means. Obviously, be smart and you've got limits to work to. But I haven't seen property turn bad.
Yeah.
Like my colleague Glenn says, it's not fruit. It doesn't go bad.
Yeah.
So.
And what are some negatives in doing real estate in the boom?
Look, it moves quick. It's incredibly frustrating as a buyer in that boom period where, as agents, even they say, oh, you're the agent, you're doing this on purpose. It is just such a large volume of buyer activity that we're managing that it is incredibly stressful for a lot of buyers. It's a lot of work on the agent side that you don't see in the background as well, managing all these buyers and trying to communicate with everyone to the best capacity. But the bottom line is it moves really, really quick.
So it's important to buy in that same market because you could be needing to buy something
definitely. If you're selling and buying, you want to do it in the same market. Typically, what follows the boom is the downturn.
Yes.
So the buyer frustration reaches to a point where buyers like, you know what, I'm sick of this, I'm not going to buy anymore. And then a large portion of the market drops out. The government might, increase rates to try to settle the market. And then you see that downward cycle again. So
to spot the boom, would you say that's when you start hearing, oh, this sold for $500,000 at auction. This is when you see sold in 24 hours.
Yeah.
This is when you see, like, what else?
The indicators to me is how quickly properties are selling. Yeah. So on the market, off the market, on the market, off the market.
And maybe more off-market deals because agents that don't have
more off-markets,
I know in the downturn, nearly everything has to go to market, do all the marketing to find the buyer. But in a boom or a good time, like a lot of time, you have a property, you get 40 people through the open and you got 10 offers. You can sell another couple of properties without any marketing.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's probably in the upturn and boom a little bit more important to try and get on an agent's database. Even a lot of seasoned clients of our seasoned buyers, we see them create a second email address just for real estate. Yeah. Because they know the importance of judging.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Mine's called Stevan Bubalo property .17756631, something like that. No, it's kidding. But they're kind of the 4 phases to look out for. Where are we at the moment? Personally, I feel as though we've come out of the stabilisation. We're in the upturn phase. And the reason I say that is on the front line, we've seen a good increase in the number of buyers circulating in the marketplace. We've seen relatively interest rates, the positive message with interest rates.
Yes.
We're seeing offers coming in on the majority of properties relatively quickly in the residential market. And these are all indicators that there's a slight upturn. In my opinion, I think rates will play the biggest factor right now because obviously we all feel better, but unless we can spend more, we can't pay more.
Yeah.
So I think we're in the upward trend now, and I think a lot of people also that had thoughts of selling realize how hard it was to get a loan and are keeping property longer. So there's not as many listings on the marketplace either. So all those factors indicate to me that we're starting to see the market move a little easier.
Good. I think that covers it.
I think so, guys. Like always, if we can help you, Michael Burgio, Stevan Bubalo, we're at Novak Properties. Anytime, reach out. I'd love to answer any questions you've got.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Guys.
Bye.